Hi, I'm Laura, and this is the Solo Business Playbook podcast. If you're building a business on your own, thinking about starting to freelance, but feel like you have no idea what you're doing, then you're in the right place. I've taken the non-traditional path from the 9 to 5 into freelancing and now running my own business. And on this podcast, I'm sharing what's actually worked, what hasn't, and everything I'm still figuring out along the way. We'll talk about finding clients, growing your income, and building a solo business that actually supports your life without leaning into hustle culture, and with real stories from other freelancers and founders. So let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Solo Business Playbook podcast. Today, I am joined by Nadia, and I'm so excited to have her with me. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
I'm
I can't wait to get into everything we're going to talk about today. But firstly, did you want to just quickly introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, my name is Nadia. I've been a feminine embodiment coach for the last 2 years, but my journey with embodiment has been for the last 10 years. It's just been my personal journey of going through finding who I am, like after losing so much of myself and my identity through romantic relationships. That's where I've started losing myself. And then now, I've just put together everything that I've learned into this body of work of mine.
I love that. And I can definitely relate to losing yourself through romantic relationships for sure. I feel like it's something that a lot of people have in common. And especially I think if you're in relationships from a young age as well, before you've really kind of like figured out who you are as an individual. So that's amazing. So how would you describe what you do on a day-to-day to someone that you just met at a party, for example?
Raya Rituals, I created it as a space for women to come back to themselves, as a reflection of my own personal journey. And it's really to help women to find like deeper self-trust with what they already know. I think a lot of us have outsourced, answers outside of ourselves, outside of our bodies, thinking that the answers is out there. But when in reality, our bodies have always known. If anything, we've only been learning to distrust, not trusting what we already hold. So yeah, Raya really, it means remember all you are. So I help women guiding them back into listening and being sensitive and slowing down back into their bodies so that they can make decisions based on what they, desire to have. Because usually we have this conflicting voices in our heads where, it's either our parents want us to lead a different life. And those are the moments that kind of pulls us away from the life path that feels aligned to us.
Yeah.
So yeah, Raya is that journey back home to yourself.
I love that because I feel like there's so many like outside influences on your life, and sometimes you do really have to like step back and look inward and think what actually feels right for me. Am I just doing this, like you say, because my parents want me to, or am I doing it because school told me this was a good path to take, or society in general is set out this path of expectation that everyone should follow. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And that's how we end up sometimes in a career or in a relationship for 10 years without realizing that at that point, that moment in time where we're like, oh, this is no longer for me.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when we're disconnected from the body and haven't slowed down enough to notice the ways that the body has been like speaking to us the entire time. Yeah.
Amazing. And you talk about when it comes to like business, for example, embodying your brand rather than performing. And I'm intrigued to get into what you see the difference as between embodying and performing, because it's so intertwined with our daily lives and what's, again, expected of us.
I think performance, I think we have been so used to, we're living in a culture of like hustle and grind. So we have an idea of what confidence looks like, what success looks like, without even slowing down to ask ourselves, what does confidence look like for me? Success looks like for me. So I think we end up, I think I've shared a little bit about that saying, fake it to make it. It's not something that I resonate with because it keeps asking you to be someone else that you're not, to arrive at this destination and point that will never be there either, because the goalpost will keep moving. We keep moving it. So at what point are we going to honor our truth and who we are to get to somewhere that we actually are really devoted to and passionate about? So for me, performance is really not being truthful with who you are, when in actuality, there's a lot of safety that we could create to accept the version of ourselves that we are in right now, the phases and the journey that we're going through. And I think that is the moment that you actually make it.
Yeah.
And then finally, you can sense this confidence and deeper conviction. And because you're moving with more vulnerability, because you allow yourself to be imperfect. And I think the conversation right now is really active. Everyone is yearning for, rather than someone that knows everything, people are yearning for authenticity, for more honest realness, So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love the fact that you brought up the phrase fake it till you make it, because I feel like it's so almost drilled into people going into business, like, oh, just fake it till you make it, like you're never going to be fully ready. And I do think there's a little bit of truth in like going for it because you're never going to be fully ready. But I love the fact that, yeah, when we first started talking, that was like one of the first things you said to me, is that you just do not believe in this phrase. And I was like, oh, I've never heard anyone actually come out and say that. Everyone else I know, especially in business, is always said, yeah, fake it till you make it, keep going, like just act like you're the pro until you are, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really love that you brought that up, because I think, especially in terms of this hustle culture phenomenon that went on, I would say particularly in the like last 5 to 10 years, it seemed to be everywhere, all on Instagram, like boss babes, hustle culture, all of this. And if I'm comparing it to like social media, the kind of downfall of Instagram and the rise of TikTok, where it is much more raw content and it feels more real, and it feels like someone has just picked up a camera and kind of yapped to it rather than spent hours editing and perfecting an aesthetic grid and things like that. So I do think it's really interesting, this almost like need for the shift away from performance.
But and in that itself, I think the thing here is that we're the only one who knows that relationship that we have with it. As much as we can move into more authenticity and more rawness, it could also turn into performance.
Yes.
We could also end up using our vulnerability as a way to capture our audience, to be validated in what we're doing, So it's really, at the end, it's that relationship that we have with it too.
Yeah. That's actually a really interesting point as well, because I hadn't even thought about it like that. But yeah, I do feel the amount of people that are told these days, yeah, be authentic.
Yeah.
Authenticity is what sells now. Be real, be raw. But at what point are you not then being authentic because you're trying so hard to be authentic? And I think it can be really difficult, especially in like today's age, where we're just constantly exposed to so much information and so many more opportunities than we would have had like 20 or 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago even. And I think with that, it can be so hard to truly know yourself, because you could see an article about one thing, and then when you read the comments and there's different opinions, your opinion can suddenly change purely based on, oh yeah, that's actually a good point. And now that we're so exposed to that constantly, all day, every day, we're fed new information and new ideas and new things happening in the world. It's really hard to kind of like ground yourself back to, okay, who actually am I, and what do I believe in, and how do these things make me truly feel, rather than how I think they should make me feel.
Yeah, you're touching onto something really powerful. Yeah.
So was there a moment where you realized that you'd been performing rather than embodying who you are? Was there kind of like an aha moment that then led you to start Raya?
I wouldn't say that there was just that one point that really shifted everything. It was really a culmination of everything that I have avoided that brought me to this almost quite dramatic downfall, because I have really refused to listen to my body, because there's a part of me that just completely didn't trust it.
Yeah.
Just feel like whatever I've known, because I was taught to, like, not really trust your body, because what you know is not the truth. And all of that because of society and the upbringing that we were kind of brought up in. But an example, the moment that really stood out for me is the time when I was, at the time, was a creator, a social media creator, and I thought to present myself that was really confident. I had to be this loud, outspoken, quite edgy, not just through my voice, but through my appearances. I used to have this really pixie blonde hair. And I was surrounding myself with all these big creators, and it felt validating. It felt like I've made it. This is like success. I was invited to different brand deals, opportunities, flown to this different because, yeah, all these like successes that felt like it's finally, that validation that you've been waiting for. But your body always has a way to keep reminding you that this is not who you are, and that's where the performance mask starts to come off. And that was when the circle that I was in, I slowly felt like I was outcast and I felt like I didn't belong. And usually, how do we notice these moments of like there's a dissonance of where we're at? It usually comes through with that tension that we feel in the body. And if it's not that, then there's the constant comparison that we have with other people. It could come through with envy, with jealousy, or even exhaustion. And I think that's one of the most common one today, where we're just so tired. And I think these are already the body signals of telling us that there's something there that we want to look at.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like a lot of people will probably relate to this. And I think it's definitely, for me at least, something that's come with age as well. I feel like when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I just so wanted to be liked. And I mean, it's natural. Obviously, you want people to like you, but you do spend almost most of your young adult life performing because you want to be accepted and you want to be, friends with the cool gang and things like that. And I guess that does start to spill over into careers as you start, you leave university and you start working, for example. But it's definitely something I found that helped as I got older, and I just slowly started being more confident in just who I was and not doing things that I actually had no interest in doing because it's just what everyone was doing. I was like, actually, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry.
and I think you're so right. It is quite that mask that we put on is so old, isn't it? Since we're so little, because it's how we learned that makes us belong in a circle, and the older we get and that circle gets wider, then that performance ends up being bigger and bigger. And at what point are we willing to cost, to take on the cost of not being truthful with ourselves, to please other people?
Yeah. I hear a lot of other people in this sort of space talk about ego death. And is that a part of it as well, do you think? Or is that not really relating to?
I would say it absolutely. And I think everyone has a different definition to ego death. And I think for me, the ego death is really, I definitely felt physically as well. There was a sense of death when I went. This was a moment when everything came crashing down. It was after I was left from my relationship, and it forced me because I had this, anxious attachment, and that my worthiness was all about being loved, being desired, being chosen. And it was the most highlighted when I'm in a relationship, but it was highlighted everywhere across my life, through my career, through my friendship. But it wasn't as obvious as it was reflected to me through my relationship. And yeah, so the ego death for me, it was really a combination again of everything that I didn't want to see about how I have really put a lot of my worthiness in someone else and outside of myself. And I finally had to let that go. And I think there's moments in our lives that we usually look at that phase in our journey as a failure. Like we have completely like fall flat on our face. It feels like we're broken. And I think that's why we tend to be so hard on ourselves when we're in that phase and we avoid it. Sometimes if we're really smart with our survival instinct, we'll just try and push it through. There's no point of like staying sad and stay in this process too long. But this is the actual moment in your life that is where the body is actually trying to communicate that it's ready to heal, to see and to face what it has been holding on to. So in some ways, I find that ego deaths are an opportunity for us to really get slower into the body and really make space and create this kind of moment for yourself to hear what your voices are again, to understand yourself and get to know yourself again.
Yeah, amazing. And I feel like we're in a very special place because I do feel like Bali is it sounds cliche, but it really is a special island for that. And even for me, I was living in London for like a few years. I was in a job that I loved, but I knew that the like 9 to 5 life wasn't for me and I wanted more than that. And I left, came to Bali, and essentially had my own mini version of an ego death, I guess. Like the whole time I lived in London, had come out of a really bad breakup, and my friends used to call me the Russian because I would like never let my emotions out. I was very cold, and I remember coming to Bali, and it was when I kind of got past the emotional stage, it really did just feel like I had let out a huge breath, and I was like, okay, wow, yeah, now actually what do I want my life to look like from now onwards? Because it almost felt like a rebirth rather than an ego death, honestly. So
Yeah.
I was like a clean slate, and I was like, wow, I'm here in Bali now, and what's next,
Yeah.
basically.
And the thing about death is that the next chapter is
Yeah,
rebirth, and
yeah.
that is quite a natural kind of phase that we're welcoming
Yeah.
into, and that's why it's beautiful that we're welcoming in that. And I think you're pointing out something that's quite powerful. It's the environment that we're in as well
Yeah.
that could allow us to finally feel like we could
Yeah.
let go, because sometimes when we have been used to the same circle, the same,
Yeah.
places that we're in, it's
Yeah.
hard to crack out of that.
Yeah. So a lot of people that are listening to the podcast are probably either building something for themselves or at least thinking about it. And so for the people that maybe haven't started, they feel like they're not quite the person who has built it or is capable of building it. And I guess this relates to, not feeling ready to do something. Does that resonate at all with kind of your own experiences?
I mean, that's a big yes.
Yeah.
Of course, I think for me, that was my biggest challenge.
Yeah.
My challenge was really not feeling like I was ever ready. And English isn't my first language. And that's something that I've always just put so much emphasis on
Yeah.
to get better at, to sound better, because I had this idea of a woman that is an expert or a leader in her space. She needs to speak with such eloquency, that doesn't really, yeah, so she knows her shit basically.
Yeah.
But it cost me so many years before I was ready to build the business that I have
Yeah.
today. And it was only been recently too. So it took me a long time. And we never stop to ask ourselves whether this version of success that we're working towards and building towards, is it really the success that it's meant for us? And I think a lot of the time, I think that's where we fall short.
Yeah.
And we end up just building something that isn't really a reflection of what we want.
Yeah. And I think that's probably because you always hear these stories of entrepreneurs and like even people like Richard Branson or Mark Zuckerberg
Yeah.
who now have made it.
Yeah.
But if you go on like Richard Branson's Wikipedia page and you read all the businesses he started before Virgin was successful, it's crazy like how many different things he tried. And I think that probably in a way links together. You can try all these different things and then the right one will be the one that, it succeeds because it feels natural. It doesn't feel forced. It's not performative. It's just what you truly believe in. And I feel like I have a similar founder story to you. I put things off for years thinking, I'm not that person. I'm not ready yet. I need to be this. I need to be that first. And now when I look back, I'm like, the business I do now, I definitely could have started this 10 years ago. Like, I'm not really any more ready now than I was back then, other than I'm just backing myself this time.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah, it's really interesting. And I think it's something that a lot of people will relate to. And I tell people a lot when I'm working with them, there will never be a day where you're like, okay, I'm ready now. Now's the day that I'm going to start. And no one's ever going to knock on your door and say, yep, you're ready, you're good, go and start this.
Yeah.
You just have to take that risk anyway.
And I like to speak into like taking that risk. Is like, I think we both have heard this, you just got to start, but you can understand as much as you want. And that was what I was struggling with. I knew that no one will care if I just started,
Yeah.
no one's going to be on the other side judging me and constantly taking notes about how successful I am or not. But I realized that no matter how much my mind understand what I need to do, my body wasn't believing it.
Yeah.
So that's why what we're feeling is really this body not believing that we're safe to actually start expressing, start building. And now that's why I feel like coming back into our bodies is actually more tangible than you think. It's actually, there's a lot more, yes, there's an actual practice for you to return so that you can show up in your life and be okay in this moment so that your mind and your body can match and you start expressing yourself.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like there's definitely moments in my business and my founder journey where I've almost felt like a physical resistance. And I'm like, something is on my to-do list, but I just cannot do it. And one example is obviously like when it comes to marketing your business, you kind of need to be everywhere. But I, for some reason, even though my business is B2B, so I do work with a lot of small to medium business owners, they're obviously on LinkedIn, but I just cannot in my soul bring myself to do anything on LinkedIn. It's just not me. I see people's posts on there and I'm like, it's so performative and it's so inauthentic, and I can't even force myself to post one thing on there. And it really is just this resistance. Whereas anything else, when it comes to marketing, podcasts, TikTok, email, newsletters, easy. I can do it. I can organize it. I can get it done. But for some reason, LinkedIn, I'm just like, absolutely, just it just doesn't feel right to me. But it's crazy the force of this resistance that I feel. And I just know that anything I would post on there, it just wouldn't sound like me because I would be performing for it. So when you were going through the transition of, starting Raya Rituals and building your business, what was the hardest part during that process of staying connected to yourself whilst also trying to make everything work practically, financially, trying things you'd never done before, but also trying to stay true and authentic while you were doing that?
I think this is the thread around that where we jump into our survival mode, right? That's the hardest part. It's like when that's active, there's a lot of your decision making gets a little bit shaken because you might have this passion. You started off with like this big energy, surge of energy, but when you're met with like not making an income, your family's not supporting you, it starts to like get you down and it detracts you from making an aligned decision. And what's happened to me is that, I'll take up certain other jobs that I was good for my skill and it makes me money, but it ends up costing me my energy and my exhaustion on the other side. So I kept staying in this loop of building other people's business, and not my own. And I think that's a trap that is quite common for us to fall into. And so that's why for me, the key is always coming back into my body, even if I have fallen out, for a moment there. I'm like, ooh, I'm noticing. And that's why it's important to keep checking in with the body. I'm noticing that I'm feeling exhausted now. Perhaps there's some part here that I am doing I can close down and create more space to come back into what I was currently building. And on top of that, I think a lot of it is related to our lifestyle. I had to change certain lifestyle, and some lifestyle meant that it was comfort. It felt secure. But once I've made that, the more I allow myself for more discomfort in changing my lifestyle, meaning, especially when you're in Bali, you're seeing everyone eating out, going to these beautiful gyms and all of this. And then you're there buying groceries and cooking your meals, at every single day. And so there's a point and a part of you that just feels like, oh, your voices will come back, that self-doubt, that distrust. So for me, it's really coming back to the body, listening to it and, constantly checking in.
And do you have any, obviously, if you feel happy to share, is there anything that you practice consistently to keep bringing yourself back into your body?
Yeah, there's a foundational practice in and the feminine embodiment kind of space for me that I practice. It's called primal feminine flow. There's different versions of this. Sometimes it's called intuitive flow. It's created by my teacher, Jenna Ward. And so it's really a practice where we slow down. We have a little bit of music in the background. It's not a dancing practice. It's really to allow the body to slow down enough so that we can sensitize and feel into where the body wants to lead you and move. And that's a beautiful way for us to learn to move with the body. Rather than the mind leading the movement, it's allowing the body kind of like lead.
I think that slowing down is so underrated.
Yes, absolutely.
People don't slow down enough because Since coming to Bali, obviously started doing yoga. I only do it once a week and it's only yin yoga. But recently, because before I could just never meditate, I could never switch my brain off. And I feel like the last few times I've gone is the times where I've been like, wow, okay, I really slowed down in those classes and I really just allowed I'm still not very good at meditating and not thinking about anything, but I did just relinquish the control and let my mind just go where it went. And it's so underrated. And I think it's very hard, especially when I was living in London, to just not get caught up with the constant busy lifestyle, constantly doing. And because, like you say, as soon as you are feeling anxious or feeling stressed, I feel like those emotions are then making decisions for you, and you're not making decisions from a grounded place of like rational thinking almost.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the same kind of when you're building a business and you're not seeing results as quickly as maybe you thought you would, or like you say, you're struggling with income, or maybe you've lost a client and things like that. And it's really easy to let the emotions take over in those situations and make decisions on your behalf rather than stepping back, slowing down and thinking, okay, everything will be okay.
Exactly.
But how do we actually go about this rather than just panic stations? Yeah.
And isn't it quite ironic, because you even mentioned about the overthinking is really there because we are trying to control.
Yeah.
But the more we control, the more we're out of control.
Yeah.
And we make decisions that isn't aligned.
Yeah, definitely. So talking of kind of this survival mode, dealing with finding clients, maybe not having support, how did you start with your journey of embodiment and how did that help you? And did you kind of notice a clear before and after once you started these practices?
I think a lot of us have seen either, the word healing or arriving. We think that once we overcome it, it will never reoccur in our lives. And that's, I'm done. I've done my my due. But that's not the truth. What it really is that, the more I've practiced embodiment, and which is to show up daily to check in with my body, that really is what embodiment is, to check in with your body consistently and expanding my emotional and body vocabulary so that at any point in my life, I get to understand what it's trying to say. If I'm feeling tight or itchy and I have a bit of pain in my throat, I kind of can sense what it's trying to tell me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what has helped me.
Yeah.
Every time when I feel, rejected, or if a client is not resonating with my messaging, or I feel like I'm not attracting anybody and magnetizing anybody, then I get to come back into my body and really understand where I'm at and how I feel about that, and just, make decisions from a better, clearer place.
Yeah, I love that. So I feel like visual branding is something that a lot of founders and freelancers kind of get in their head about, maybe spend a bit too long on as well. So what kind of advice would you give to those people who are trying to build a brand that really reflects who they are and what they're offering and what they're about?
I think I come from a background of as a fashion stylist, and I used to tell women to dress a certain way based on their body type, apple shape, hourglass, and all those color analysis.
Yeah.
And this is me telling women what to wear, how to express themselves, and that is something that I absolutely have gone 180 from, because how our expression is true to ourselves. It is so unique. And this is where I get so passionate about. And I love taking women through my session of Remember Her, because it really is where I take women back into their bodies. Again, the answer is within our body, even if it's visual. For example, I have a client who wanted to connect more with her sensuality and her branding. She wants that to come across her branding.
Yeah.
But because she is a softer, a poet, a writer, but how can we inject a little bit of sensuality in there? And usually when you think of sensuality, you think of the color like reds, the element of fire. But when we dive deep into her body, she was sensing this bright yellow light, like the sun, and she sensed, and we start getting into texture, what the body is sensing, and like the breeze. So you can sense that her language could be more whimsical, airy, because of the flow of that. And I think this is where, when we come back into the body, we actually know more than what an actual mood board is.
Yeah.
We get so caught up in like how to dress in a way, you know, the usual suits. But
Yeah.
maybe the suits isn't for us, you know, to be a boss babe. We might be really soft, you know,
Yeah.
and we might completely turn it upside down because that's more true to us. And I think that's more exciting. Yes, so much more freedom to express who we are. And I get so excited about it.
No, I love that, because I do think there's a trap now that people fall into as well, where they kind of see someone doing something and it's working.
Yes.
And maybe they like as well what that person's doing. So then they think, oh, I need to do that because I like it. I like what they've done and it's working. So I need to do that for me. And I feel like it can be really hard to be true to yourself, especially in your own visual branding, but also without the pressure of you have to create a killer brand and it has to be business 101 and like
To be
it has
taken seriously.
yeah. And I think it is really hard to not succumb to that pressure when you're truly trying to reflect who you are and what your values are and what you're offering people. Yeah. Is there something specific that you notice, and whether that is how someone dresses or how they carry themselves or how they maybe show up on camera or show up on social media, that you maybe consistently see people getting wrong because you can tell that they're performing? Is there like a giveaway that you can see? Or is it more just about like their energy and how they're coming across when they present themselves?
I wouldn't consider that there's anything wrong with, you know, a certain expression. I think sometimes, you know, not all of us go through a similar timeline, similar journey that we need to come back to more truthful. You know, I am higher than thou. You know, I don't think there's any point that will happen. And I think part of it is really just a journey to explore as well. So for me, it comes off like people being envious of other people. There's a lot of comparison, and that's where the performative side kind of would come through, because we spoke about performance.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, I don't think it's really necessarily wrong the way people are expressing. I think it's always just a space for them to explore themselves. And I think for me, the key point here is really about noticing at what point is that expression is starting to feel quite, you know, what does force actually mean? And in the performance is usually reflected when you can sense that they are, if ourselves, I think it's easier for me to speak on my end because, you know, everybody's body is different. And I think a lot of us are either, you know, again, about like understanding what I used to share my expression in this really loud voice. I had to like constantly project and to get attraction. When I realized that what confidence and what my true expression was a lot softer, was a lot slower, and it was hard for me to come back to that. Yeah.
Love that. So, what would be your advice for someone who is either in like a life or career transition right now and they're feeling a little bit lost in it? What would you, if you met them and you saw that they were struggling, what would be like your first bit of advice that you would give them?
For me, it's really important for us to create the space to allow for that to even happen in our lives. And I think just creating permission that we are in a transitional phase and it is very natural. A human evolution. And I think just knowing that, it just allows our body to be soothed and to have deeper safety and to move through that. And I think that is really the main key thing, because I think with permission, we get to let the body do what it needs to do, whether it means that we want to be alone or we need support from our circle, or, you know, whatever that is going to move through you. And sometimes it might even surprise you. You might be pulled to completely, you know, as Eat, Pray, Love. She was taken a completely whole journey, and that was so beautiful because of these transitional moments in their lives. And I think for me, it's really giving permission to sit in it.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely, because I think that as humans, we are so hard on ourselves. And sometimes, like you say, it's just permission, a little bit of self-compassion, just giving yourself a break sometimes. And I think unless you do that, you can't then make it out the other side, like you're saying.
And for me, when I went through my life transition, I really used that time because of that permission that I gave myself. I used that time to reconnect with what does the little Nadia, our little inner child that wants to, the one that we've been put away.
Yeah.
Because we've prioritized
Yeah.
everyone else in our lives except for ourselves. So how can we reprioritize
Yeah.
our desire, our pleasure, our play? What would we want to really do with our time if it wasn't because of responsibility? And I understand this comes with privileges too. I want to recognize as well, not everyone has the privilege of time and space, but at least if we could just bring in that question into our body, what would we like to do, even if it's just enjoying an uninterrupted, beautiful matcha. If it's just to have that moment to yourself, I think you'll be surprised of how powerful those moments can be for you.
Yeah, definitely. I love that so much. So what do you know now about showing up, whether that's in business or just in life in general, that you wish someone had sat you down and told you right at the beginning? What's something that you maybe had to learn the hard way?
Yeah, for me, it would be that life moves in seasons, that we are not going to have a linear trajectory.
Yeah.
So, in understanding that, we'll realize that we're not just having to always just keep going, keep pushing, keep hustling. That's just not really sustainable for me. And I think once I learned to really live with my cyclical nature and build my business around that and how my body wants to move, I am so much more present. There are going to be the spring and summer where I'm launching something, expressing something quite big and bold. And then there will be another season where I am taking it in, going inward, maybe having smaller circles and really nourishing myself and my family. Because at the end of the day, you're not just building a business alone. You're building a business with your family around you, your community that you're in service of around you. So you obviously want to be, filling your own cup so that you can be in service of other people, like a lot deeper.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you have touched on seasons. And I guess, especially for women, something that I noticed as I started building my business was also how much my cycle affects my body, my mind, and the ability to allow myself to say yes and no to certain things during each stage of my cycle. For example, I know that at one point during the month, I'm much less receptive to criticism.
Yeah.
Or even constructive criticism. I take it so much more personally. And now I recognize, okay, this is where I'm at. This is how my body's feeling. This is how my mind is feeling. This isn't a personal attack. I haven't done anything wrong. Everything is okay. And I think that for me as well was just such a big part of when I was building my business, allowing myself permission and forgiveness to sleep for an afternoon instead of working because my body needed it. And I think there's just so much power in just being more conscious of your body, your mind, and not forcing anything. And that's why I'm so against hustle culture. Like, I work a lot, but I love what I do. And I also recognize when I need to stop and when I need to take breaks or when I need to go away for the weekend and turn my laptop off and things like that. And I think there are so many ways to be successful. I mean, what even is the definition of successful is another question that we won't go onto that tangent. But there's so many ways to be successful in your own life without burning yourself out and hustling and
I think the misconception of living with the cycle is that we're too free flowing. But if anything, I've learned that you have to be more discerned because you know what season you're in. So you're a lot clearer with your yeses, with your nos, and what you can take on in terms of projects, what you can bring in, because you know that on the other side of the nourishment, you're going to pour it into your family. So you have to be, really be decisive. So there's a lot of that as well. That's a part of living with your cycle. It's not just like moving something with being taken, washed off away.
Yeah. And my calendar dictates my life now according to my cycle, because if I know I'm not going to have energy in that week, I'm like, no meetings, no new discovery calls, no podcast recordings. Like, I need to just be unsociable for that week.
Yeah.
Definitely no evening dinners and things like that. I'm in bed by like 7 p.m. Okay, so this is going to be my last question for today. And this is for everyone who's listening, who's like trying to build something of their own, whether that is a business or just a little bit more freedom in their life, or maybe better relationships with the people that they know. But what is the one thing that you would want those listeners to take away today?
It would be to trust in your body more than you think. Like, you can trust it. You already hold those answers.
Yeah.
And it's really just building a stronger relationship with that knowing and intuition. And I think we've shared all the different ways throughout our conversation today of coming back to that voice. Yeah, because I think we've always been born with it. It was always so strong, but I think we've been learned to let it go. And I think it's time for us to honor that voice.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like that is a great last bit of advice for the episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've had just the most amazing hour talking to you, and I feel like I can relate so much to so much that you're saying, and I cannot wait to come to one of your in-person events. I'm very excited to do that. So where can everyone find you if they're wanting to know more about Raya Rituals and follow your journey?
You can connect with me on social media, on Instagram at Raya Rituals, and my website is also Raya Rituals. Yeah, I love expressing myself artistically. So
Yeah.
a lot of bold colors there.
Yeah, I
and
love that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I will put all the links in the description as well, so that people can easily find you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So that's it for today's episode of the Solo Business Playbook podcast. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean a lot if you followed along or left a quick review, because it really helps more people to find the show. And if you're building your own business right now, I'm right there with you. You can find more resources, behind the scenes, and ways to work with me in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. So that's it for today's episode of the Solo Business Playbook podcast. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean a lot if you followed along or left a quick review, because it really helps more people to find the show. And if you're building your own business right now, I'm right there with you. You can find more resources, behind the scenes, and ways to work with me in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.